Imagine standing in front of something so massive, so precisely crafted, that even with today's machines, engineers would hesitate before attempting it. Now imagine being told it was created thousands of years ago by people we're taught were primitive. Around the world, there are discoveries that quietly challenge everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. Not legends, not exaggerated myths. Real places, real structures, real artifacts, carved, built, and assembled with an accuracy that still leaves modern experts arguing. From stone blocks so heavy they were never moved, to entire cities hidden beneath the earth, from artworks that don't resemble any known culture, to gigantic symbols only visible from the sky. These discoveries weren't supposed to exist, or at least not at this level of skill, planning, and skill. Archaeologists have mapped them, measured them, studied them for decades, and still don't agree on how or why they were made. Some of these sites suggest engineering knowledge far ahead of their time. Others hint at beliefs, technologies, or purposes we no longer understand. And the most unsettling part? Every explanation we have feels incomplete. In this video, we're uncovering 8 archaeological discoveries that refuse to fit neatly into history books. Each one raises a simple but uncomfortable question. Were ancient civilizations far more capable than we've been led to believe? Imagine a single block of stone so enormous that even today's strongest cranes would struggle to lift it. Now imagine ancient workers not only planning to move it, but carving it directly out of a mountainside using nothing more than hand tools. No engines, no steel machinery, no computers. Just human muscles, stone chisels, and an ambition so extreme that it may have crossed the boundary between brilliance and impossibility. This is not a myth, and it's not a theory. The stone is still there, attached to the earth, exactly where it was abandoned more than 6 centuries ago. On the outskirts of Nanjing, in China's Jiangsu province, lies a place that feels less like an archaeological site and more like a paused moment in time. Yangshan Quarry looks quiet today, almost ordinary at first glance. But as you move closer, the scale begins to register, and that's when the disbelief sets in. This quarry was active long before the Ming Dynasty. But in the early 1400s, it became the center of one of the most ambitious construction plans in Chinese history. The Yongle Emperor, one of the most powerful rulers of the Ming era, ordered the creation of a monumental stone stele for his father's mausoleum. Not a modest marker, a towering symbol of imperial power meant to last for eternity. To build it, workers didn't quarry ordinary blocks. They went big. In fact, they went too big. Carved directly from the living rock are 3 colossal stone pieces, each in a different stage of completion. The largest of them is almost impossible to comprehend. Still attached to the bedrock, it is estimated to weigh around 16,000 tons. To put that into perspective, that's heavier than many modern warships. Heavier than the stones used in the Great Pyramid. Heavier than anything humans have ever seriously attempted to move in one piece. Nearby lie 2 more massive blocks, each weighing several thousand tons, their edges roughly shaped, their surfaces scarred with chisel marks. The quarry walls around them show careful planning flat planes, straight cuts, and angles that suggest this wasn't a symbolic gesture. This was a real engineering project, carried out with full intent to finish it. And yet, it never was. The plan was to transport these stones several kilometers to the Ming Xiaoling Mausoleum, where they would be assembled into a single upright monument. But here's where the mystery deepens. Even with unlimited manpower, moving a block of this size would have required a flawless system of sledges, rollers, reinforced roads, and perfect coordination. One mistake could fracture the stone or kill dozens of workers. Modern engineers who've studied the site agree on one thing. Even today, moving the largest block intact would be an extraordinary challenge. So why did Ming engineers even begin carving it? One possibility is miscalculation. Ancient builders may have underestimated the final weight, realizing too late that transport was impossible. Another theory suggests that political priorities shifted. The Ming Dynasty was stretched across massive projects, the Forbidden City, city walls, military campaigns. Resources may have been redirected before the quarry work reached completion, but there's a more unsettling question. Beneath all of this dot, if the builders knew the risks, if they understood the difficulty, what made them confident enough to start? Standing at Yangshan today, you see more than abandoned stone. You see ambition frozen in rock. The chisel marks feel fresh, as if the workers simply stopped one day and never returned. There's no evidence of collapse, no signs of disaster, just silence. The quarry forces us to confront a troubling idea. Either ancient engineers push their abilities beyond reality, or they believe they possess methods we no longer understand, techniques that were never written down, knowledge that vanished when the project was abandoned, and that's what makes Yangshan so haunting. It isn't a failure carved in stone. It's a question, one that has waited more than 600 years for an answer. If this was only the first mystery, what happens when we encounter structures that weren't abandoned but finished? Imagine knocking down a wall in your own basement and discovering that it doesn't end in rubble, but in darkness. A tunnel, then another room, then stairways descending deeper and deeper into the earth. Now, imagine realizing that what you've uncovered isn't a shelter or a cave, but an entire city engineered to hide thousands of people underground for months at a time. No sunlight, no surface access, just stone, silence, and survival. This isn't fiction. This actually happened. And what was found beneath the ground rewrote everything we thought we knew about ancient life in Anatolia. In 1963, in the Cappadocia region of central Turkey, a homeowner was renovating his house when he accidentally broke through a wall in his basement. Behind it wasn't soil or rock. It was empty space. A narrow passage cut cleanly into stone dot. As he pushed forward, the passage opened into another chamber. Then another. Staircases appeared, sloping sharply downward. Corridors branched off in multiple directions. What began as a simple home renovation quickly turned into one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Hidden beneath the town of Dringq was a vast underground city dot. As archaeologists began exploring, the true scale of Dringq slowly came into focus. This wasn't a temporary refuge or a handful of caves. The city plunged nearly 60 meters underground and spread across multiple levels. Some estimates suggest as many as 18. The deeper researchers went, the more complex it became. Rooms weren't randomly carved. They were planned. There were kitchens with soot-blackened ceilings, evidence of centuries of cooking fires. Storage chambers lined with niches for grain, oil, and wine. Communal halls large enough to hold gatherings. Smaller rooms that appear to have housed families. Even spaces believed to be schools or administrative areas. And then there was the engineering. Dringq's ventilation system alone is enough to raise eyebrows. More than 50 vertical air shafts run from the surface to the deepest levels, supplying fresh air throughout the city. Some of these shafts doubled as wells, meaning inhabitants could access water without ever returning above ground. This wasn't accidental design. Airflow had to be calculated from the beginning. A mistake could have suffocated everyone below. Defense was equally sophisticated. Massive circular stone doors, some weighing hundreds of kilograms, were carved to roll into place from inside corridors. Once sealed, they could only be opened from within, effectively trapping intruders outside. Narrow passageways forced anyone entering to move single file, making large attacks impossible. Even animals had designated spaces. Stables were carved near the upper levels so livestock could be brought underground quickly without clogging deeper living areas. Waste disposal, food storage, airflow, water access, everything points to long-term habitation, not brief emergencies. So the question becomes unavoidable. Who was this city built for? Cappadocia has been home to many civilizations over thousands of years. The Hittites, Phrygians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Seljuks, and Ottomans. The region's soft volcanic rock made carving possible. But Durinkyu goes far beyond what necessity alone would demand. Most researchers believe the earliest levels may date back to the Phrygians around the 8th century BCE, with expansions added over centuries. By the Byzantine era, the city was definitely in use. Historical records suggest early Christians sheltered here during periods of persecution. Later, it may have protected communities from Arab raids, but this explanation only goes so far. Durinkyu could shelter up to 20,000 people, along with animals and supplies. That's not a hiding place for a few families. That's infrastructure for an entire population. For months, possibly longer. Why would so many people need to disappear underground at the same time? Some scholars suggest the city functioned seasonally or as part of a larger network. Cappadocia is dotted with hundreds of underground complexes, and there is evidence that some were connected by tunnels stretching for kilometers. If true, Durinkyu wasn't an isolated refuge. It may have been one node in a vast hidden system beneath the region. Then there's the construction challenge. Every chamber had to be carved by hand. Every ton of rock removed had to be hauled upward through narrow shafts using nothing more than ropes, baskets, and human strength. Lighting came from oil lamps, meaning ventilation had to be operational from the earliest stages, just to allow work to continue. The builders didn't just carve downward blindly. They understood structural stability. Load-bearing pillars were left in place. Ceilings were shaped to distribute pressure evenly. This kind of planning suggests generations of accumulated knowledge, passed down and refined over time. And yet, no written records describe who first conceived this idea or why. Standing inside Durinkyu today, the silence is overwhelming. The stone walls upsound. Corridors twist just enough to disorient. It's easy to imagine what life here would have felt like. The absence of daylight. The constant awareness of being buried beneath meters of rock. The knowledge that the surface world was too dangerous to face, which raises the most unsettling possibility of all. What was happening above ground that made an entire city choose the darkness? Durinkyu doesn't just challenge our understanding of ancient engineering. It challenges our understanding of ancient fear, ancient conflict, and ancient survival. And if this city existed, how many others remain undiscovered? Because the deeper archaeologists dig in Cappadocia, the clearer one thing becomes: Durinkyu was not alone. What if an entire civilization reached extraordinary heights, then vanished so completely that even its neighbors forgot it ever existed? No written history, no legends, no gradual decline, just a sudden disappearance, until one day the earth itself betrayed the secret. When farmers in China began pulling strange objects from the soil, they didn't realize they were uncovering a culture so advanced, so unfamiliar, that it would force historians to rewrite one of the world's oldest continuous histories. In 1929, a farmer digging an irrigation ditch in Sichuan province, China, struck something hard beneath the soil. What emerged wasn't stone or metal tools, it was jade. Finely carved, polished, deliberate. More artifacts followed, but at the time, no one understood their significance. Decades passed before the true scale of the discovery came into focus. In 1986, construction workers near the Sangsingdui site uncovered two massive sacrificial pits. What lay inside shocked archaeologists. Hundreds of artifacts were packed together: bronze masks, statues, weapons, jade objects, and ceremonial items, many of them broken, deliberately before burial. But it wasn't just the quantity that stunned researchers. It was the design. The bronze masks found at Sangsingdui, looking like anything else in ancient China. Oversized eyes bulge outward, some with cylindrical pupils extending several centimeters from the face. Noses are sharp and elongated. Ears stretch unnaturally long. The proportions feel alien, almost unsettling, as if they were meant to depict things that weren't quite human. Yet these weren't crude works. They were masterpieces. The bronzes show advanced casting techniques that rival or surpass those of contemporary Shang Dynasty artifacts. Some statues are over 2.5 meters tall, cast in multiple sections and assembled with astonishing precision. One famous figure depicts a standing man holding an unknown object, his posture formal, his clothing detailed down to folds and patterns. Then there is the bronze tree, a towering, intricate sculpture featuring branches, birds, dragons, and mythological forms, all fused into a single structure. Nothing like it exists anywhere else from this period. Its symbolic meaning remains unclear, but its craftsmanship leaves no doubt. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing. And here's the problem. According to traditional Chinese history, the Shu kingdom associated with Sanxingdu was considered minor compared to major civilizations along the Yellow River. It wasn't supposed to possess this level of technological sophistication. It wasn't supposed to have its own artistic language, completely separate from the rest of China. Yet, Sanxingdu doesn't just differ slightly. It looks like it belongs to a different world. There are no inscriptions to explain who these people were or what they believed. No written records mention rituals of this scale. The artifacts appear suddenly in the archaeological record around 1200 BCE, and then stop. As abruptly as they appear, they vanish. There's no clear evidence of war, no signs of gradual decay. Instead, it seems the site was intentionally abandoned. The sacrificial pits suggest a final act, valuable objects broken, buried and sealed away, as if the people knew they were leaving for good. Why would a civilization destroy and bury its own masterpieces? Some researchers believe environmental disaster played a role. Earthquakes may have altered river systems, flooding the region and forcing people to relocate. Others suggest political upheaval or religious transformation. Perhaps the rituals associated with these artifacts were deliberately ended, but there's another layer to the mystery. Faces on the masks don't resemble the people of the region. They don't resemble known deities either. If they represent gods, those gods don't appear anywhere else in Chinese mythology. If they represent rulers or priests, why depict them in such exaggerated otherworldly forms? Even more puzzling, similar bronze techniques appear hundreds of kilometers away, suggesting trade or cultural exchange, yet the iconography remains unique. It's as if Sanxingdu borrowed technology but rejected every shared symbol. When archaeologists reconstruct the site today, they face an uncomfortable truth. Sanxingdu forces a break in the narrative. It doesn't evolve smoothly from earlier cultures, and it doesn't transition cleanly into later ones. It's a spike, a sudden bloom of brilliance, followed by silence. Standing before the masks, many visitors describe the same feeling. Not all alone, but disorientation, as if they're looking at something that doesn't quite belong in its time. And that may be the most disturbing thought of all. Sanxingdu wasn't forgotten because it failed. It was forgotten because it disappeared. And if an advanced civilization could vanish so completely, leaving only broken symbols buried underground, what else has history erased? Imagine walking across a desert for years without ever realizing that beneath your feet lies a perfect geometric shape, so precise, so vast that the human eye cannot comprehend it from the ground. Now, imagine that this shape was built thousands of years ago, without machines, without maps, without the ability to see it from above. These structures weren't meant to be admired by people standing nearby. They were designed for something higher, something watching from the sky. For centuries, the deserts of Jordan and Syria appeared empty, vast, lifeless expanses of stone and sand. Bedouins crossed them. Armies marched through them. Travelers mapped them. And yet no one noticed anything unusual because from the ground, there is nothing to see. It wasn't until the early 20th century, when pilots began flying over the Middle East, that a disturbing pattern emerged. From the air scattered across the black basalt deserts were massive stone circles, perfectly round, eerily precise, and impossible to recognize at ground level. They came to be known simply as the big circles. Each circle measures roughly 400 meters in diameter. Their walls are lonely knee-high in most places, made of uncut stones carefully arranged in continuous loops. There are no entrances, no obvious pathways, no structures inside. Just emptiness. And here's what makes them truly unsettling. They are almost flawless. From above, the geometry is astonishing. No deviations. No wobbling lines. No signs of trial and error. These are not crude shapes made by chance. They are deliberate, calculated, and repeated across vast distances. Today, more than a dozen big circles have been identified, spread across Jordan and southern Syria. Each one is remarkably similar in size and construction, as if built from a shared blueprint. But there's a problem. The people who built them had no way to see them from the air. These structures date back at least 2,000 years, possibly older. At that time, there were no balloons, no aircraft, no elevated vantage points high enough to reveal the full form. From the ground, a person inside the circle would see nothing more than scattered stones. So why build something whose shape could only be appreciated from above? Archaeologists have ruled out several possibilities. They are not defensive structures too low and too exposed. They are not animal pens, no openings, no signs of containment. They are not dwellings, no hearths, no tools, no habitation layers. Even ritual explanations struggle. Most ancient ceremonial sites include markers, altars, or artifacts. The big circles contain none. They are empty by design. Some researchers suggest they may have served as territorial marker symbols meant to define land ownership or sacred zones. Others propose astronomical purposes, but unlike Stonehenge, there are no alignments with solstices or stars. And then there's the most uncomfortable interpretation. What if these circles were not meant for humans at all? Across the same region, archaeologists have documented other strange formations, desert kites, wheels and lines that stretch for kilometers. Like the big circles, many of these shapes only make sense when viewed from the sky. Together they form a landscape of symbols written on the earth itself. Almost as if the builders were communicating in a language of scale using geometry so large that only something above could read it. Critics argue this is coincidence, that ancient people could plan large shapes using ropes, stakes, and basic surveying techniques. And that's true to a point. But achieving this level of consistency across multiple sites without ever seeing the full design requires extraordinary coordination. It would mean generations of builders following inherited instructions, trusting an unseen result. Standing inside one of these circles today is a surreal experience. There's no center marker, no focal point. You feel exposed, directionless, as if you're standing inside a thought rather than a structure. And that may be the clue. The big circles don't tell a story. They announce presence. Someone was here. Someone wanted the sky to know. And just like that, the desert keeps its silence. But as we move from land to water, the next mystery becomes even harder to ignore. Because this time, the structure didn't just survive abandonment. It was swallowed. Imagine discovering a massive stone structure older than recorded history, not buried beneath sand or jungle, but hidden beneath dark, silent water. No legends describe it. No ancient texts mention it. Yet it's there, resting on the lakebed, built stone by human hands. The most disturbing part isn't its age or its size. It's the fact that it was never meant to be underwater at all. In the early 2000s. A team of sonar surveyors was scanning the floor of the Sea of Galilee, Israel's largest freshwater lake. Their goal was routine mapping, nothing more. But then the instruments picked up something that didn't belong. A circular anomaly. At first, it looked like a natural formation. But as the scans sharpened, the shape became unmistakable. This wasn't random geology. It was deliberate, structured, massive. Divers were sent down. What they found stunned everyone. Resting on the lakebed was a giant stone cairn, built from uncut basalt rocks stacked carefully into a conical form. The structure measures roughly 70 meters in diameter and rises nearly 10 meters high. Its estimated weight exceeds 60,000 tons. That's heavier than modern destroyer-class warships. And every single stone was placed there by human hands. There is no mortar, no cement. Just thousands upon thousands of basalt blocks, some weighing over a ton each, arranged with intent and balance. The technique resembles ancient burial cairns found on land, but on a scale never seen before. Here's where the mystery deepens. The structure sits beneath several meters of water. But geological studies suggest that when it was built, this area was dry land. The water level of the Sea of Galilee has risen and fallen dramatically over millennia due to tectonic shifts in climate change, which means the builders didn't dive to construct. They walked their dot, so who were they? Based on nearby archaeological sites, researchers estimate the structure could date back to the early Bronze Age, around 4,000 years ago. At that time, small settlements dotted the surrounding landscape. Fishing communities, agricultural villages. Nothing that suggests the ability or need to move and stack tens of thousands of tons of stone, and yet, they did dot the structure's purpose remains unknown. Some believe it may have been a burial monument, possibly for a powerful leader or clan. Others suggest it served as a territorial marker or ceremonial site. But unlike typical burial cairns, no human remains have been found, at least not yet. Another theory proposes it was linked to water rituals, even before submersion. In many ancient cultures, bodies of water were seen as gateways between worlds, between life and death. Building a massive monument near a shoreline could have held symbolic meaning long forgotten, but there's a logistical nightmare hiding beneath every explanation. Basalt is not easy to work with. It's dense, heavy, brutal on tools. Transporting stones of this size would have required organized labor, planning, and time. A lot of time. Generations, perhaps, which raises an uncomfortable question. Why invest so much effort into a structure that would eventually be swallowed by water? The builders couldn't have predicted the exact rise of the lake, but they must have noticed environmental changes, flooding, shifting shorelines. If the water was encroaching, why continue building? Unless the water itself was part of the design. Standing, or rather, floating above the structure today, divers report a strange sensation. The water is often murky. Visibility is limited. The stones fade into darkness quickly. You don't see the whole shape at once. You sense it, a presence beneath you. This isn't a ruin broken by time or violence. It's intact, undisturbed, as if it was finished, and then deliberately left behind. Unlike cities that were abandoned or destroyed, this monument didn't fall into ruin. It was claimed by the lake. And that may be the key. Difference. The Sea of Galilee structure forces us to confront a reality we often ignore. Ancient people weren't always fighting nature. Sometimes they built with the expectation of change, of loss, of submersion. If that's true, how many other monuments now lie beneath oceans, lakes, and rivers, completely erased from our historical memory? Because once water takes something, it doesn't just hide it. It rewrites the story. And as we move from the depths of water back to land, the next mystery proves that advanced stonework didn't vanish with time. It was perfected. Without mortar, without cement, and without permission from history books. Imagine standing inside massive stone walls, so perfectly balanced that they've survived for centuries without mortar, cement, or metal reinforcement. No glue holding them together. No inscriptions claiming ownership. Just stone placed upon stone with such precision that gravity itself became the binding force. Now imagine being told for generations that the people who built this were too primitive to understand architecture. The truth, buried under colonial and southeastern Africa, surrounded by rolling hills and open plains, lie the ruins of Great Zimbabwe, one of the most impressive stone complexes ever constructed in the ancient world. At first glance, it feels impossible. Walls rise over 11 meters high, curve gracefully without cracking, and extend for hundreds of meters. Each stone block is carefully shaped and stacked. No mortar fills the gaps. No cement seals the joints. And yet the walls have stood firm for over 700 years. This wasn't a small settlement. At its peak between the 11th and 10th centuries, Great Zimbabwe was the center of a powerful African kingdom. An estimated 10,000 to 20,000 people lived here. Trade networks connected it to the Swahili coast, the Middle East, India, and even China. Gold, ivory, and goods flowed outward. Foreign ceramics flowed in. But for a long time, history refused to accept this. When European explorers first encountered Great Zimbabwe in the 19th century, they couldn't believe Africans built it. So they invented alternatives: Phoenicians, Arabs, even the Queen of Sheba, anything except the truth. Because the truth challenged a narrative. Archaeology eventually corrected the lie. The builders were local Shona ancestors, African engineers, African planners, and their stonework reveals mastery, not coincidence. The most striking structure is the Great Enclosure, the largest ancient stone structure south of the Sahara. Its outer wall forms an elegant ellipse, enclosing a mysterious interior space. Inside stands the conical tower, a solid stone structure with no doorway, no window, and no clear purpose, so that it isn't a lookout. It isn't a tomb. It isn't structural support. So why build it? Some scholars believe it symbolized authority, perhaps a grain store representing wealth and control over food. Others see religious meaning, tied to fertility or kingship. But no explanation fully satisfies the scale of effort involved. Then there's the stonework itself. The walls are not uniform. Lower sections use larger, rougher stones. Higher sections transition into smaller, finely shaped blocks. This isn't random. It suggests knowledge of load distribution: heavy stones for stability below, lighter stones above to reduce stress. This is advanced engineering logic. The stones were quarried nearby, shaped by hand and transported without wheeled vehicles or draft animals. Every block was placed deliberately. Mistakes would weaken the entire wall, and yet, the structures endured earthquakes, weather, and centuries of abandonment. What makes Great Zimbabwe even more fascinating is what it doesn't have. No written language carved into stone. No statues of rulers. No monuments boasting victory. Power here wasn't loud. It was architectural. The city's layout reflects social hierarchy. Elite areas are separated from common spaces. Elevated sections overlook others, not for defense, but symbolism. Stone becomes language communicating control, order, permanence. Eventually, the city was abandoned. Not through invasion, but likely environmental strain, deforestation, resource depletion, shifting trade routes. The empire moved on, but the walls remained. They didn't crumble when the people left. They didn't collapse when forgotten. They waited. Great Zimbabwe forces us to confront a bias older than archaeology itself, that advanced knowledge must come from a familiar source. But here stands proof that innovation does not belong to one region, one race, or one timeline. And as impressive as these walls are, they're not the end of the story, because the next mystery takes us even further back in time, before writing. Before cities, before recorded religion, where human forms blur into something far stranger. Bias is far more uncomfortable. What if the oldest human figures ever created were never meant to look human at all? Long before writing, long before kings or temples, ancient artists shaped beings with reptilian faces, elongated skulls, and hollow, unblinking eyes. These figures weren't hidden. They weren't mistakes. They were displayed, carried, and possibly worshipped. And the most disturbing question isn't what they represent. It's why they appear at the very dawn of civilization. In the arid lands of ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, Kuwait, and parts of Syria. Archaeologists uncovered small clay figurines dating back more than 7,000 years. At first glance, they appear simple, crude, almost childlike. But the longer you look, the more wrong they feel. These are the Ubaid figurines, created by one of the earliest known cultures to form permanent settlements. Their bodies are unmistakably human: arms, legs, torsos, even clothing in some cases. But their heads are something else entirely. Elongated skulls, slanted almond-shaped eyes, sharp beak-like noses, and faces that resemble reptiles more than people. Some figurines depict females, holding infants with the same reptilian features. Others show individuals wearing what appear to be ceremonial garments. The expressions are emotionless, blank, as if humanity was never the point. These weren't toys. They were found in domestic spaces, burial contexts, and ritual areas. Some were carefully placed, others deliberately broken. This suggests meaning symbolic or religious thought, but meaning of what? The Ube culture predates the Sumerians, often described as the foundation of civilization. They introduced irrigation, large-scale architecture, and social hierarchy. In other words, they were building the framework of organized human life, and at the heart of that framework, they chose to represent something that didn't look like them. Mainstream archaeology offers several interpretations. One theory suggests the figures represent deities or mythological beings, serpent gods associated with fertility, wisdom, or the underworld. Snakes, after all, appear in many early belief systems as symbols of renewal and knowledge. Another explanation is more psychological. The figures may represent masks, ritual costumes, or exaggerated artistic styles meant to convey power or otherness. The reptilian features could symbolize transformation humans, becoming something more during ceremonies. But there is a problem. These features appear consistently across sites, across generations, and across regions. Artistic styles usually evolve, symbols shift, but the Ube figures remain strangely uniform. Even more unsettling are parallels found elsewhere. In later Mesopotamian mythology, we encounter beings like the Apkallu semi-divine figures, often depicted as human-reptile hybrids, said to have brought knowledge to humanity. Flood myths describe a time before recorded history when others guided early civilization. Are these coincidences? Archaeology cannot confirm that these figures represent real beings. There is no physical evidence of reptilian humanoids walking ancient Mesopotamia. But archaeology also cannot explain why the first symbolic humans weren't human at all. Symbolism matters. Early art reflects worldview. It shows who mattered, who was powerful, and who was revered. If humans saw themselves as central, they would have carved themselves. They didn't. Standing in a museum, looking at these small clay figures, the discomfort is immediate. They don't invite connection. They create distance. They feel like witnesses rather than portraits, and that might be the point. Perhaps the Ube people believed humanity was not at the top of the hierarchy. Perhaps they saw themselves as caretakers, followers, or students guided by forces older, wiser, or more frightening than themselves, or perhaps the figures were warnings. Symbols of something that existed before written memory erased it. What makes the Ubaid figures truly disturbing isn't the idea of reptilian gods. It's the timing. They appear at the very beginning of structured human society. Before temples, before kings, before history learned to write itself, which raises the final question of this journey. If these figures reflect forgotten beliefs, forgotten teachers, or forgotten fears, what else did ancient humans know that we no longer remember? Because the last mystery takes us across continents and proves that even without contact, ancient cultures were building the same impossible structures, as if following the same forgotten blueprint. Across mountains, forests, coastlines, and plains on different continents, among cultures that never met ancient humans built the same structure. Same concept, same form, same impossible stone placement. No shared language, no shared religion, no written communication. And yet the design repeats again and again, as if humanity was following instructions written somewhere deeper. They are found in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, and even parts of India and Korea. More than 40,000 of them have been documented, and countless more likely remain undiscovered. They are called dolmens. At first glance, they look simple. Upright stone slabs supporting a massive flat capstone, like a stone table abandoned in nature. But that simplicity is deceptive, because many of these capstones weigh 50 to over 100 tons. Some are larger than modern buses. Some sit precisely balanced on stones, barely touching at the edges, and they were built thousands of years ago, long before cranes, long before steel tools, long before recorded engineering principles. Dolmens date back to the Neolithic and early Bronze Age, roughly between 4000 and 2000 BCE, sometimes earlier. They appear during humanity's transition from hunter-gatherers to settled societies, from chaos to structure, which makes their distribution deeply unsettling. In Brittany, France, dolmens line ancient paths. In Korea, entire landscapes are dotted with them. In India, they stand near tribal burial grounds. In Israel and Jordan, they rise from basalt fields. In the Caucasus, they appear with almost identical proportions. Different people. Different environments. Same idea. Most archaeologists label dolmens as tombs, and many were indeed used for burials. Human remains, pottery, tools, and offerings have been found beneath or inside them. But that explanation raises a bigger problem than it solves. Why would early societies often, struggling to survive, invest enormous effort into moving stones they could barely control? For the dead, some dolmens sit in locations that make no practical sense for burials, on slopes, ridges, or areas far from settlements. Others show signs of reuse over centuries, suggesting they were more than graves. They were landmarks, anchors in the landscape. Then there's the construction mystery. To lift and place a 70-ton stone requires coordination, planning, and knowledge of leverage and balance. Not brute force alone. Ramps, rollers, earthen platforms, and precise timing would have been essential. And yet, no single dolmen site shows evidence of the full construction system. It's as if the method traveled, but the instructions did not. Even more disturbing are the similarities in orientation. Many dolmens are aligned with solar events, sunrise on solstices or equinoxes. Others face specific directions with no obvious local significance. Which brings us to the most controversial idea. What if dolmens were not inventions, but implementations? What if early humans weren't independently discovering this design, but inheriting it? Across this entire series, we've seen the same pattern repeat. Yangshan showed ambition beyond practical limits. Durinkyu showed survival through hidden infrastructure. Sangsingdui showed symbols without ancestry. The big circles spoke to the sky. The sunken cairn anticipated environmental change. Great Zimbabwe mastered stone without mortar. Ubaid figures questioned humanity's place. Dolmens unify all of it. They're simple enough to replicate, complex enough to challenge explanation, and widespread enough to suggest something shared. Not shared culture, shared knowledge. Perhaps dolmens were teaching tools, early humanity learning to shape the world. Perhaps they marked sacred points, energy lines, or social memory. Or perhaps they were messages not to gods, not to the dead, but to future humans. Proof that once, long ago, people everywhere were thinking the same impossible thoughts. Standing before a dolmen today, you feel it immediately. Not fear, not awe. Recognition. As if this stone arrangement belongs here and always has. And maybe that's the final truth. Human history isn't a straight line of progress. It's a cycle of remembering and forgetting. Knowledge rises. Knowledge scatters. Knowledge survives embedded in stone. The dolmens didn't teach us how to build. They remind us that we already once knew. And that raises the most unsettling question of all. If ancient humanity shared a blueprint once, what caused us to lose it?